Our main focus tonight is on which bills are alive or dead following crossover day in the General Assembly. We also update you on efforts across the state to hold congressional representatives accountable to resist the Trump administration. This and updates on the rest of the Virginia news you need to know on our weekly news roundup starting now. This is the For Virginia Podcast. Thanks, and welcome to the For Virginia Podcast for the week ending February 11th, show number 20. I'm your host, Michael Brandon Wade. Thanks for tuning in. For Virginia is a Virginia State Political Action Committee focused on supporting progressive causes and candidates at the local and state level. Our podcast is meant to provide you with news and analysis of politics across the state, helping you get the information you need to be an informed citizen, battle right-wing propaganda, and help progressives organize and activate where we are most needed. It's been a heck of a few weeks. Last week's show was cut short a little bit due to time constraints and real life. But we have a full show ahead of you for this week, and we appreciate you checking us out. Hope you can share us on social media and get the word out and register on our site if you're not already. We'll get right into it. The Washington Post reports that Fairfax City Council member David Meyer won a special election on February 8th following the 2016 arrest of then-Mayor Scott Silverthorne on charges of trading methamphetamines for sex. Meyer will serve the rest of Silverthorne's term, which expires in July 18. Silverthorne resigned after his arrest in August. He faces a felony charge of distribution of methamphetamine after allegedly agreeing to provide an undercover Fairfax County police officer with 2 grams of meth in exchange for participating in an orgy in a Tyson's Corner hotel. I think we reported on this a few weeks ago, but it's so unbelievable. It's hard to get the words out of my mouth. Richmond Times-Dispatch reports that Richmond Mayor LeVar Stoney issued a directive to city employees Monday, basically promising inclusion, declaring Richmond a sanctuary city without actually using the word sanctuary city, saying that he would make Richmond welcoming and safe regardless of immigration or refugee statuses. Stoney, who is the Times describes as a young progressive mayor, found himself caught between activists calling for him to formally declare Richmond a sanctuary city and President Donald Trump, who has promised to pull federal funding from cities that adopt such policies. On Monday, Stoney promised to, quote, protect and promote policies of inclusion and avoided the word sanctuary. Now, personally, I guess we should note Charlottesville, where Mayor Mike Singer has proclaimed the city a capital of resistance and vowed to provide assistance to immigrants who need visa help. Singer says he is considering making Charlottesville a sanctuary city and is looking to ways to add protections for immigrants and political refugees. Now, many of you are no doubt concerned, as I am, with the recent news of ICE immigration and enforcement raids that have been occurring in places like Arizona and New Mexico, California, people getting deported. I'm hearing reports that people are getting, picked off the street while they're waiting to pick their kids up at the bus stop and so forth. Obviously, the Trump administration is taking drastic steps at this point, following their failure with the so-called immigration and refugee ban. So I do think it is called for that localities and cities take steps to voice their support for our immigrant population. I made a recommendation earlier on Facebook to one of our groups that people need to go to their city council meetings, or at least contact their legislators, the city council and mayor. I'd probably recommend that you do that before showing up at a city council meeting, but I encourage everyone to coordinate a campaign to contact city council members, mayors, to encourage them to make similar statements, whether it's as defiant as Charlottesville Mayor Mike Signer or more tempered responses like what LeVar Stoney has done, basically affirming support for refugees and immigrants and undocumented immigrants or so forth. I had a call into the John Frederick show following it was the week that the immigration ban came out. He had a person on who basically said that they wish that they could hang some of these people like Bill de Blasio and some of these California mayors for defying the feds on this matter. And I'll post the link to my response on that, but we have to do what's right, and we need to push our legislators and our elected officials in order to do what's right, and we have to resist these unfair, inhumane, and cruel policies any way we can. And so kudos to Mike and kudos to LeVar for taking a stand on this. And they're gonna get some pressure on them, but we got to fight back any way we can. The Daily Press reports that the number of Virginians who have health insurance from the state's marketplace under the Affordable Care Act grew by more than 36,000 in the 2016 open enrollment period. Statewide, over 421,000 selected health insurance plans, which was a significant increase from the 385,000 who were enrolled in 2015. Now, I was a huge proponent of Medicaid expansion in Virginia. It is quite a shame that we lost basically down to one vote. I forget the gentleman's name, but we had a Democratic senator who basically resigned rather than vote. There was some accusations of nepotism, reasons of nepotism that we won't get into at this point, but Medicaid expansion was basically dead this year. There was I don't believe there was even a bill pushing it forward because it was just a non-starter. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But as we'll talk about later in the show about Planned Parenthood funding, it just seems that the Republicans in the General Assembly are putting politics ahead of the well-being of Virginians. Not just the Medicaid expansion and Planned Parenthood. I don't think that's about abortion. I think that's about women's health and screenings and so forth. It saves lives, and that's apparent. But they want to make a political point about pushing to their base, basically. And we'll talk about more about the Affordable Care Act repeal and how that ties into Congress coming up later in the show. But, you're talking about a great portion of Virginians. 421,000 who are currently enrolled in Medicaid directly. That's not even including the people who are affected, via pre-existing conditions or, young people who are on their parents' insurance and so forth. We can debate the merits of how Obamacare was put forward and how it succumbed to the interests of the insurance companies and so forth. But again, a huge boost in enrollment, 36,000 additional people. And we're talking about something that affects, 9.2 million people signed up throughout the 39 states that use it, use the federal marketplace. And, it's just incredible. Supreme Court will be taking the case of Gavin Grimm, a transgender teen who sued the Gloucester County School Board after it barred him from the boys' bathroom. It's quite a shame that by the time the case actually gets settled, Grimm will actually be out of high school. But kudos to him for taking such a stand and standing up for what he believes is right, especially in place such as Gloucester, which is for those of you that don't know, is very conservative area on the I believe it's what considered the northern neck, or the middle peninsula rather. The Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit in Richmond sided with Grimm in April. There was a lot of the Obama executive order, I believe, which kind of spurred the bathroom bill in North Carolina and Bob Marshall's bill here in Virginia. Religious freedom laws spiking up all over the place as well with regards to this, and gay marriage as well. It will be interesting how things go. So with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, if it was a tie, it would go back to the appeals court in favor of Grimm. Now, obviously, Trump's appointment of Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, I don't believe, I mean, here we are mid-February. I'm not really sure that Democrats in the Senate can delay such a nomination before the next Supreme Court, or until after the next Supreme Court session starts. So potentially looking at another 5-4 decision on that. Who knows? We'll keep an eye on that and see how that goes. Obviously, worst case scenario would go against Gavin and legalize discrimination against transgender students or transgender individuals across the nation. But we'll have to see and wait for that to play out. So I'm sure everyone's aware of the Trump travel ban, aka the Muslim ban. Whether the executive order actually enacts a Muslim ban, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals decision earlier this week ruled that intent, the Trump administration's intent, is actually applicable in determining the scope of the executive order. Terry McAuliffe and Bobby Scott were at least two Virginia Democratic lawmakers who were at Dulles, 2 weeks ago now, giving support for people that were affected by the travel ban. The Washington Post reports of Governor Terry McAuliffe and Attorney General Mark Herring suing the federal government, Trump administration, about the travel ban, and gives us a good story about an area of Northern Virginia with Muslim population and how a mosque over there is seeing an outpouring of support as the state fights the Trump travel ban. So encouraging words of supporters outside the mosque as people go in, expressing their solidarity with immigrant and Muslim populations. And then one last note about Culpeper and the lawsuit against them for supposed religious discrimination against a Islamic center. Regular viewers of the program will know that we've talked a lot about the Culpeper County Mosque lawsuit. For those of you that aren't up to speed, the County Board of Supervisors denied a request for a new Islamic center in Culpeper to install a pump and dump permit, which is basically a alternate for a septic system. The county has routinely approved such requests for other organizations, but in this case, they denied it for the mosque center. Late last year, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a suit against the county regarding the matter. And our update tonight, basically to let you know that the Culpeper County attorney, Bobby Joe Alexis, filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, alleging that the Department of Justice lacks subject matter jurisdiction. According to the brief, the Islamic Center did not follow the required channels and submitted an incomplete application for a pump and haul sewer permit to serve the property, which apparently is not able to hook up to public utilities. They're saying basically that the Board of Supervisors were justified in denying the utility request because the Islamic Center did not own the property at the time of the request and did not yet have a structure on it. So we'll see how that turns out, and we'll keep you informed as more news becomes available. Posting show notes with links to all the sources that we reference on the show, including most of the bills that we talk about tonight. Please share this podcast on social media, follow us on Facebook, and help us get the word out. We'd also like to hear any feedback on the show, or if you'd like to contribute, please let us know. Leave a comment on the video, email info@forvirginia.org, or contact us on Facebook directly if you're interested in helping the progressive revolution in Virginia. And if you like what we're doing and would like to support us, please head over to our Act Blue page and make a donation. We'd like to thank all of our regular contributors for their support, as well as you, dear listener, and hope that you will find it in your heart to help us continue this moving forward. So if you haven't already joined an Indivisible group, then you might want to pay attention. A group of Democratic congressional staffers who were active during the Tea Party days recently released a Indivisible guide that outlined the steps that Democrats and progressives can take to emulate the Tea Party tactics. And they've already had a lot of success recently. And I'll back up a little bit. It's not just a Democrat or progressive thing. It seems to be a lot of people taking off. Some of you might have seen the news this weekend, Friday, where Congressman Chaffetz was accosted at a town hall that he did in Utah, Salt Lake City, I believe, which is, R plus 25, meaning, 3/4 of the electorate are Republican voters. So there's been a lot of activity in Virginia as well. I know we've got probably over 500 people in our little 757 group, and I'm in CD2. There's groups all over the place. I think Roanoke or Charlottesville had hundreds of people at their meetings, and it's really starting to take a toll. I mean, we've had a lot of hundreds of thousands of phone calls to Congress. I saw Al Franken on Real Time last night speaking about, the 200,000 phone calls against Betsy DeVos and how that was really having an effect. And we're starting to see signs of the same kind of impact in Virginia. The Chesterfield Observer writes about Dave Bratt. Quote, the election of Donald Trump appears to have energized a segment of Republican Representative Dave Bratt's constituency that all but ignored him during his first term in Congress. The byline on this, or the subtitle, is Furor Over Trump Leads to Movement, Grill the Bratt. I think we mentioned last week that Bratt was complaining of women accosting him everywhere that he went with regards to the Planned Parenthood defunding and so forth. And I think we basically poked fun at him saying, get used to it, Bratt. But not just Bratt, Representative Garrett from the Daily Progress. Protesters calling on Representative Garrett to oppose Trump administration, shouting no ban, no wall. Hundreds of protesters marched from the Northside Library to the Albemarle County office of Rep. Tom Garrett on Tuesday to protest the president's recent immigration ban. The news leader reports on Bob Goodlatte, who apparently hasn't had a town hall in years, saying that the public has started to notice the absence. Goodlatte hasn't responded to requests for information. Morgan Griffith getting the same treatment, according to the Southwest Times. Not a lot of information available without a subscription, but basically a picture of people outside of his office. People concerned about the Affordable Care Act repeal. 40 citizens standing in freezing temperatures at the corner of South Franklin and East Main in the hope that Griffith would hear their concerns about Congress repealing the Affordable Care Act. After an hour of protest on the corner, they walked over to his office to finish their demonstration. And in CD2, where I'm at, Representative Taylor is hosting 3 public forums this month. One on the Eastern Shore, Kempsville High School in Virginia Beach, and another one in the peninsula somewhere that has been unannounced, or the location has been undetermined yet. So these are all happening February 20, 21st, and 22nd. And I know lots of people are already gearing up to go out there and meet him. And we'll see how that goes. We'll have more information on that next week after that happens. Hopefully some live video, if we can make it out there, or some of our friends can. Like I said, we've got a lot of people here in Hampton Roads who are organized, and we got to give a big props to everybody who's doing this, whether you're in Southampton Roads or elsewhere in the area. If you'd like to provide us with some information or some details about what your group is doing, please give us a heads up, message us on Facebook, or send an email to info@forvirginia.org. We'll end with a note about Kaine and Warner, Virginia's 2 Democratic senators. A lot of people have been taking stances on some of their support for the Trump nominees. Obviously, both of them were in opposition, voted against DeVos. According to a tracker on the New York Times, Senator Kaine has voted against DeVos, Sessions, Price, and Tillerson. But he did vote for Pompeo, Kelly, Chao, Haley, and Mattis. Mark Warner, not so good, only voted against DeVos, Sessions, and Price. He did vote for Tillerson and Pompeo, Kelly, Chao, Haley, and Mattis. So only 3 no's for Warner, 4 for Kaine. If you check the show notes, we'll have the tracker so you can compare them to the rest of the Democratic senators. No one so far has voted against all of Trump's nominees. Even Gillibrand voted for Haley with 8 no votes. Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren with 7, Sanders as well, 7. Al Franken, 5 no votes. Schumer, 5. So Kaine, 4, and Warner, 3. So just to let you know where Virginia senators stand amongst the Senate. But again, if you're not already a member of a Indivisible group, I suggest that you go on Facebook, look for one, check out the Indivisible Guide. Most CDs should probably already have a group already established. Some of them are closed, some of them are open. But it looks like the organization and activities that are associated with those groups are going strong, and we'll continue to see more protests and marches, including one that we have planned here in Norfolk for the 15th of April, which is Tax Day. It's a Tax Day protest. We have about 120 people so far signed up to march out at the IRS building in downtown Norfolk. There are other marches all across the country. You can find more info about that by going to taxmarch.org. We had, last time we counted, there was over 20. Los Angeles, Washington, Chicago, San Fran, Philly, New York, Denver, Austin. We've got the one in Norfolk. I'm not aware yet of any else that are occurring in Virginia. But April is a long ways off, and we'll probably have, well, not we, but we will most likely see many marches occurring, not just related to the tax march, but between now and April, I mean, we'll probably see like at least 6 coordinated marches. We do know that there is a planned general strike on the 17th. Not sure how that's going to go. Maybe a little too early. A lot of people are in conflict about whether it's a good idea or not. I know that there are events planned, national coordination going on as far as that's concerned. But we'll leave that up to you as to decide whether to get involved with that at this point. And a final note, Carly Fiorina was on the John Frederick show earlier this month saying that she's seriously considering the opportunity to run against Tim Kaine in the Senate race in 2018. Now, we already told you before that Laura Ingraham, noted conservative talk show host, is considering a run as well. So I'm just amazed that Fiorina would consider running as well. I think the term I used the term carpetbagger to describe Laura Ingraham, and I think that term would probably apply as well here for Fiorina. Fiorina actually ran for Senate in 2010 in California. So I'm not really sure what ties she actually has to Virginia, but following the failed 2010 bid, the 2016 bid for president, as well as being Ted Cruz's vice presidential candidate, I'm not really sure that's such a great idea for her. Frederick seems convinced, based on her activity around the state lately, that she will probably go for it. So we'll see. Will definitely be an interesting 2018 for the McCain Senate seat, but obviously we've got to get through 2017 first. And with that, let's get to the House of Delegates news. So much news to bring you going on in the General Assembly. They currently hit their halfway point this week. For those of you that aren't aware how it works, the General Assembly has either a 45 or 60-day session. At the halfway point of that session, they call it crossover day. Bills that haven't been passed in their respective house, either the upper house, the Senate, or the lower house, the House of Delegates. If you're a House of Delegates member, you submit a bill. If it hasn't been passed by crossover day, it's basically dead. Because what happens is that all the bills on either side of the House of Delegates or the Senate, once they're passed before crossover day, then they're start to be considered by the other side. So there's been a lot of news in the past month as to what's been killed and what has carried on. And we're going to try and get through as much of it as possible in the next few minutes. There's a lot to go through. We'll start with environmental news. An exemption for fracking chemicals passed. The House gave preliminary approval to legislation that would exempt certain chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing from public disclosure. Now, proponents of the bill say that this is necessary to protect trade secrets for the gas companies and oil and gas companies that use fracking. Opponents of the bill say that this is a measure that will prevent municipalities and citizens from knowing exactly what chemicals are being pumped into the ground. As many of you are well aware, hydraulic fracturing has effects on groundwater, well water, and so forth. As I said, it's passed the House. If it goes party line in the Senate, it may pass. But I do not believe that Governor McAuliffe will allow such a bill to go through. HB 1678, as it's known, was introduced by Roxanne Robinson, Republican delegate from Midlothian. A coal ash bill introduced by Senator Scott Surreville from Fairfax, SB 1398, would prohibit the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, or the DEQ, from closing coal ash storage facilities until it has fully reviewed other options like recycling coal ash for use in cement or moving it to a safer landfill. This is actually a good idea. considering storage sites on the Elizabeth River and all the controversy that's been going on with regards to Dominion pumping coal ash in the James River or Chesapeake Bay watershed. A couple other bills that failed in subcommittee that we won't go into too much detail. One for a coastal resiliency secretary, which would deal with flooding along the coastal areas, and a hurricane and flooding risk reduction failed as well. They were to appoint secretaries or committees that would have dealt with those kind of issues. I'm personally disappointed that such matters did not get approval. I'm sure there are budgetary concerns or something along those matters, but with all the concerns for climate change and flooding on the south, or at least the eastern side of Virginia on the coastal side, hopefully we'll see more action on that in future years. We really need some kind of coordinated response amongst all of the localities in the region in order to combat flooding and to deal with the risks of some of these superstorms. Some of you may recall issues with the Virginia voter registration system last November. The system crashed right before the deadline to register to vote. There was a lawsuit that went into place to extend registration for a few days. The Republicans were really upset with the state's electronic voter registration system. So Governor Terry McAuliffe had a proposed $4 million in the budget for the Department of Elections in order to kind of revamp some of these systems, which was removed from the budget that the House GOP the General Assembly GOP put forward earlier this month. Delegate Gordon Hessel gave a fiery speech on the floor of the General Assembly earlier this month that praised the Republican GOP budget for providing raises for state employees, attacking McAuliffe's budget for not doing as much. House Democratic leader David Toscano and caucus chair Charnielle Herring released a statement saying, quote, "We look forward to reviewing the proposed amendments and working with the governor, the Senate, and our Republican colleagues as we finalize a fiscally responsible budget that best serves working Virginians and supports building a new Virginia economy. Although we are pleased that the committee has recommended pay raises for our state employees, we are concerned that teachers have generally been left out, and we are troubled by the proposed cuts in the areas of law enforcement and reproductive health." End quote. The proposed Republican budget would cut $3.9 million in funding for professional development programs for law enforcement and $6 million in funding for long-term reversible contraceptives. This is on top of the bill that was passed earlier this week to defund women's health care providers that perform abortions, including Planned Parenthood. Going back to bills that deal with elections, this editorial from the Virginian Pilot regarding the GOP proof of citizenship bill has some choice words. Quote, "You got your driver's license? Good. Now, before exercising your constitutionally protected right to vote, go get your passport or birth certificate or a naturalization document or maybe a notarized letter from your mother attesting to the fact that you are who you say you are." And they go on cheekily, "While you're at it, go get your mom too. You don't want to take any chances." The Virginia Pilot does not pull any punches on this bill. Quote, "Virginia, besides being the birthplace of Constitution crafters and the source of basic ideas on how best to advance the principles of democracy, can also claim status as one of the most inventive places on earth when it comes to voter repression. In the early 20th century, determined to see the right people, defined as white people, voting, Virginia, namely Virginia Democrats, got creative. Make them pay. That was one idea. A poll tax. It doesn't have to be much, just enough to discourage poor black Virginians from participating. Make sure they pay it well in advance as well, because that will knock down their enthusiasm for voting even more. Make them take a test too. Democracy is better with smarter people voting, right? Who can argue with that? Besides, by having white voting registrars administer the test, the Democratic machine could shape the outcome even more. And, fortunately, we had most of this nonsense knocked out with the Voting Rights Act 50 years ago. Since that's been taken out by the recent Supreme Court decisions, it seems that the shenanigans are back in effect. We had similar, we got another bill that's kind of related to that about the voter felon restorations. Many of you keep up with the stuff that Governor McAuliffe had tried to do a blanket restoration of tens of thousands of voters. I believe it was like 200,000 when he first started, and then was challenged in court. They had to go back and start doing it in blocks of 10 or 12,000. There was a bill that died this session that would have basically revoked the ability of the governor to do these restorations. It would have granted automatic restoration of nonviolent felons who had served their time and so forth. But that was struck down as well. So proof of citizenship bills, the election system budget bill, and then the felon restoration bill. So those three items that deal specifically with the voting. One more that we wanted to mention as well is the personal use of campaign funds bill that failed. Those of you that aren't aware, Virginia has some of the most lax campaign finance laws in the country. First off, you have no cap on donations, meaning that a single individual can give unlimited funds to a candidate committee. Also, there are no restrictions on what can be spent. So basically, as it stands now, if you're a candidate for the General Assembly or statewide office, you can pretty much spend your campaign money on anything that you want without recrimination. Now, opponents of this bill had stated that the public record would keep people honest. Basically, you do have to report all of your campaign expenditures through the Board of Election. That gets publicly posted, reposted on places like VPAP and so forth. So people who were in opposition to this bill basically said that people weren't abusing campaign finance laws because, or campaign finance in general for personal expenditures because it's all public record. And they were concerned that having a bill would basically make everybody question everything that they did. It would open up to too many problems, et cetera. Not quite sure how I feel about that personally as a candidate for House of Delegates myself. Obviously, myself, I'm not going to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on personal expenditures, but there are certain things that could be considered questionable that it is better not to have to deal with. So people outside of the system might have a different take on that. Again, I'm not buying new shoes or anything of that nature, but having a babysitter to help my wife put the kids to bed while I'm out at a campaign event is convenient. I would say it's a legitimate expenditure. I'm not aware of any abuses in this matter as far as any other state legislators go. We're not talking about Governor McDonald levels of abuse of power at this point. I personally think it's more detrimental to Virginia democracy that corporations can contribute unlimited funds to state legislators. I mean, Dominion being the obvious example there, being able to contribute $5,000 to state representatives or state delegates, statewide candidates and so forth, or even more than that. Like I said, it's pretty much unlimited. So that does hurt challengers, newcomers to the political process, such as myself, obviously. It does encourage the large corporate interests to get involved. There's a lot of other things that encourage that as well. The campaign finance reporting, for example, having to report every single name of a person that gives you $5 or whatever is detrimental, or at least it's a pain in the butt in order to file all that information on a regular basis. I know Sanders had the same problem with all his $27 donations. They pretty much overwhelmed the Federal Elections Commission with their reporting requirements, but the election system in Virginia is definitely one of the few that does allow those unlimited campaign contributions. And I am definitely one for getting money out of politics, not only at the state, but at the national level as well. I think that Citizens United was a disaster for free speech. I'm sure many of you listening agree with me there. But going back to the proof of citizenship and the election system bills, the last one that we do want to remind you of is the nonpartisan redistricting bills. Obviously, we're good friends with the Virginia 2021 group, which is trying to get the nonpartisan redistricting bills in effect, not only for the congressional districts, but for the state Senate and House of Delegates. Those bills that were in effect for the redistricting were killed, despite somewhat tepid nonpartisan support on both sides of the Republicans and the Democrats there. There's a lot of other factors going on with that, specifically Supreme Court cases in other states that are wiping out some of these gerrymandered districts. We've got several court case that I believe was just heard by the Supreme Court. I believe it was earlier this year, late last year, if not already, considering the impact of some of the House of Delegates districts that have African-American voters kind of packed into one district. So they're looking at the efficiency rate of those districts to see whether they are constitutional or not. And what the efficiency rate means is the election close. So if you have a district that regularly swings back and forth between Democrat and Republican legislators, like some of these places in Prince William County, for example, you could say that that's a pretty balanced district. But if you have a congressional district like Bobby Scott, where he's regularly winning by 25, 30 points every election, then you can say that's probably a little unbalanced. Either that or it's just, there's legitimate reasons that might happen. I mean, you look at some place like Alexandria or areas of Richmond, obviously you're going to have a huge liberal Democratic base of support there. But if you're talking about, say, the Peninsula and Hampton Roads, where you've got Marcia Price and Mike Mullen's district and so forth like that, if Marcia is always constantly winning her district by double digits, and then you've got closer races bordering around that, then you can argue that Marcia's district is packed in a little tighter than it should be. And so there's a case right now going on targeting Marcia's district. We could see some redrawing of the districts there, and that could upset the way that the peninsula is currently set up. So that could affect Mike Mullen, Juwan Ward, and Gordon Hessel's district, where I'm running against him. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen there. But it is very interesting that I think Wisconsin just had a court case where their districts were declared unconstitutional, and so that's going to probably be a good precedent. But a lot of outrage in the past few weeks in the General Assembly as those redistricting bills were squashed. And I believe in one case, the committee basically disbanded the meeting and walked out before public comment was allowed, and people that were in the meeting were yelling and calling shame as the legislators walked out of there.
That's not boo, it's bark, 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 bark.
A lot of election bills, a lot of people that are not happy with the situation in the General Assembly right now with that. Other bills, we already talked about the Planned Parenthood defunding. The other one I wanted to talk to that dealt with public health was the HJ 549 bill, which declared porn as a public health hazard. That's right, porn. It was toned down, and now pornography, quote, leads to individual and societal harms. Yeah, I just wanted to check. That was Bob Marshall's bill. He's also the one that tried to pass the transgender bathroom bill, likened to North Carolina's HB2 bill, the one that crashed their economy after the sports teams pulled out. Bob Marshall, known conservative social societal issues legislator. We interviewed Danica Rome a few weeks ago, who is challenging him for the seat. Danica, a transgender woman, quite fitting, to be honest with you. But that bill did move forward. Now, that being an HJ bill, HJ 549, that means it's not actually a law, so it doesn't go to the Senate. It's just basically a declaration on the House side. So there's a lot of these bills. If you go on the LIS, which is a legislative information system, you'll see a lot of HB, which is House bill, and then SB, which is a Senate bill, and those are the ones that are tied into the crossover thing. But you'll see a lot of these other prefixes associated with bills, like HJ in particular. So these are the ones where it's just basically a declaration. It's not a law, so it doesn't have to go to both sides of the House. Most notably, you'll see these in recognition of people, like maybe there's a particular person in a representative's district where they want to acknowledge them or recognize them, posthumously or in recognition of. I joke on Hessel because he did the Pocosin T-ball boys team at one point, so that was one of his bills, or whatever you want to call it. But yes, so pornography as a public health hazard was passed through the House with some moderation to the language. We're not really going to go into the Airbnb stuff. I think it's been covered a lot. There's the issues with the broadband. We talked to Sam Razul last week about that, so hopefully you caught that. Transportation, a big issue. The gas tax floor. Obviously, as those of you are aware, we have a gas tax that's based on price per gallon. A lot of that has been up for debate because of fluctuations in gas price. I guess we're still under $2 a gallon here, at least in my area. And with the fuel economy and electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles coming out, there's a lot of concern that the transportation funding is being cut out from that. So that is going forward. If you're a drunk biker that likes to operate a bicycle, Segway, or moped on the highway while you're drunk, good news, it's still legal for you to do that. The bill SB 1223 failed to do that. Congratulations. There are two marijuana bills that one passed, one failed. There is a decriminalization study bill that was forwarded by Tommy Norment, Republican Senate Majority Leader. That bill will basically study the effects of decriminalization over the next couple of years. Norman, I think we've attacked him on this program for changing his stance, basically noting that one of his major campaign contributors, Altria, who was formerly known as Philip Morris, contributed over $80,000 to his campaigns over the past couple of years, is now looking at legal marijuana as a source of income to make up for the decline in tobacco consumers. A straight decriminalization bill that was put forward was summarily rejected. The bill that would have reduced the penalties for possession to $250 for making it not a criminal fine, but a civil fine, much like a traffic ticket. We've been following efforts to do that for the past at least 3 years. I believe Adam Eben was the one who was doing that previous years. Looks like Steve Heretic in the House and Louise Lucas in the Senate this time. Miss Lucas is out of Portsmouth, actually. Her bill would have decriminalized simple marijuana possession, and those were shot down. Looks like the courts of justice passed it by in the Senate, 15 to none. Not sure quite the circumstances on that. We'll have to look into that at some point. And we're almost done with our recap. The last thing we wanted to talk about with regards to the General Assembly in particular was the Inspector General appointment. So to back up a little bit, many of you may know the story of Jamichael Mitchell, Portsmouth resident, who was arrested. Gosh, I guess it's 2014 now. He was arrested for shoplifting about $5 worth of junk food from a 7-Eleven and was thrown in the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. Mitchell, who I believe is a person with mental problems, for lack of a better word, I believe he was schizophrenic or bipolar. He was arrested. He was taken to the Portsmouth Regional Jail. He was unable to understand. Basically, his family was unable to visit him because he was unable to sign the papers allowing the family to visit him. If you have a mental illness, obviously there's some problems with him actually doing the forms. Long story, he was supposed to be transferred to the Eastern State Mental Hospital. Paperwork got lost, and Mr. Mitchell proceeded to lose his mind, lost 40 pounds over the course of a few weeks, and basically starved to death in his cell while jail employees watched. And basically what happened as a result of that was absolutely nothing. No one was held accountable. I think the superintendent of the jail eventually stepped down, but we've reported on this many, many times as the controversy goes on. Excuse me. Mitchell was died in August 2015, so 2 years now, 2.5. The Office of the State Inspector General reviewed the circumstances around Mitchell's death, but didn't investigate the death itself, saying that state law didn't allow it. There were regional differences over jurisdictional authority because the death happened at a regional jail. This is from the pilot. Now, there were efforts to change those state laws. I don't have the information in front of me. The pilot reports that the Inspector General's office was created in 2012 to investigate waste and identify inefficiencies in state agencies. Now, McAuliffe is mad because the House blocked his appointment for the Inspector General position because of dissatisfaction of the investigations at the jail. Delegate Rob Bell of Albemarle made the move to remove June Jennings' name from a list of appointments because he said she didn't do her due diligence in investigating the death of Jamichael Mitchell at the regional jail. McAuliffe said he's outraged that the House Republicans are trying to fire a, quote, qualified public servant over a tragic matter for which she and her office bear absolutely zero responsibility. He blamed Republicans for not passing a bill aimed at investigating deaths and mental health screenings in Virginia jails. The Virginian pilot also reported that the bill failed because there's no money. Regular listeners of the show will know that we are operating in a $1.6 billion budget deficit. Virginia has a balanced budget amendment, which means that if you want to spend money, you have to cut it or raise it. And income tax receipts are down. State troopers are not getting paid comparable to other municipalities. And also, we've regularly talked about on this program about municipalities who are going broke as well, notably Petersburg, having to hire a city manager to avoid selling off, their fire departments and stuff like that. So yeah, General Assembly, state government, it's a bit of a mess. It's not like we're the federal government. We can just print money at the mint. But that about wraps up the General Assembly news. Like I said, a lot going on. We're halfway through the session. We talked about bills that had passed or at least proceeded and ones that have failed. So, again, the budget still hasn't been resolved. There's going to be a lot more coming up. I encourage everybody to stay informed and make note of what's going on. I think there's going to be a lot more efforts in the coming weeks to push legislators for some of these bills or against them as they come up. It seems the Republicans are obsessed with social issues. I don't think we actually got into the religious freedom bill or the proposed amendments to allow gay marriage. A lot going on with social issues, as Danica Rome said a few weeks ago with regards to Bob Marshall. He's so concerned with who's using what bathroom, but is not concerned with transportation issues or jobs in the state and so forth. So hopefully we'll see a lot more focus on issues that actually affect the well-being of Virginia citizens and not trying to suppress voters or embarrass our citizens or religious groups or LGBT groups. So anyways, we're going to take a quick break. Thanks again for listening this far. My name is Mike Way. This is the For Virginia podcast. We'll be right back after this short break. Thanks. That's all the time we've got for this week. We appreciate everyone that tuned in. Thank you for your support and all your shares. Please check out our website, share us on social media, and your financial support is always appreciated. We do have links for Act Blue, as well as some Progressive Revolution pens that we have available. This is the For Virginia podcast, episode 20. Please submit your feedback on our website, on Facebook, or by emailing info@forvirginia.org. We'll continue working hard to bring you the news, information, and analysis to help keep the progressive revolution moving forward in Virginia through 2017 and beyond. My name is Michael Brandon Wade. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.